Good Shabbos. This week's portion is Chayei Sarah. Chayei Sarah has two main stories. One is the story of Sarah's death and Avram's purchase of a burial plot, Ma'aras HaMachpelah in Hebron, and her burial. And the other story is Avram finding a wife for Yitzchak. And the way Avram goes about doing that is by sending his servant, who we assume is Eliezer, back to Avram's birthplace and finding a wife from his family. It's not clear if that was the original command, but he finds a wife from the family of Avram, and he brings her back to Yitzchak. And the question that some commentaries ask is, why is there such an aversion to having him marry someone who's local? Because Avram in his instruction says, do not have him marry a woman from the land of Canaan. We don't want any local women. Why? And the Akedas Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak Arama, asks, what's the difference? He's going back to a land of Aram where he comes from, and there we're told in the book of Yeshua, Me'olam terach avi Avram oved avodah zarah hayu, right, that he was a idol worshiper, and there are idol worshippers back there. And in the land where he is, the land of Canaan, we're told later on, the Jews should not act like the people who live in Canaan who do to'evos, who do abominations, abominable acts. They're terrible people. So you shouldn't marry the people of Canaan. The question is, why marry the people of your birthplace, which are idol worshippers? And the question is, which is worse? You would think that idol worshippers are even worse, because that's when we come to the three cardinal sins, one of them is worshiping idols, that you're supposed to be Yaharog Val Yavo. You should let yourself be killed rather than transgress. Why over here is it something that he seems to be looking past? So a simple answer would be that there is no mention really of Avram becoming a monotheist and stopping the worshiping of idols. That is mentioned in the book of Yeshua as the break that Avraham makes with his family. In the Torah, it almost sounds like there's no difference between the two, just that Avram is listening to God and starting out fresh in a new land. And really, it's nothing negative necessarily about Terach. That's a simple reading of it, although the Medrash and most of the commentaries don't look at it that way. If you read it that way, though, really we have no problem with Terach. We just want Avram to start fresh, start a new nation, a new culture, a new religion. And to do that, it's better to break away from the past. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with the people where he came from. But the people where he is, that we're told later on in the Torah, they're horrible, terrible people, and therefore we don't want to have anything to do with them. But the approach that Rabbi Yitzchak Arama has is different. He says, no, they're both bad, but there's a difference between in which way they're corrupt. The corruption of Avram and Terach and his family and his brothers and their family is that they worship idols. That's ideology. The problem with the people who live in Canaan is their morality. And he says, when you have a choice between the two, we'd rather choose the ones which have bad ideology over bad ethics, over bad character traits. He says it's easier to change an ideology. It's easier to convert someone from worshiping idols to worshiping the one and only God than it is to change someone's character. This is a very interesting comment that he makes, and he's really saying that character is everything. And this seems to be consistent with ideas that we find in the Gemara and the Talmud, where it tells us that people only worship idols because they want to have illicit sexual relations. In other words, what it's saying is ideology comes and goes. Ideology is not something which is really an essential part of us. We all use our ideologies to rationalize our behavior and our character traits. And therefore, the most important thing is that you want to be a good person. You don't want to have these terrible behaviors, whether it's illicit sexual relations or it's murder or stealing or violence. That's what we have to stay away from. And if we are committed to doing that, and if we train ourselves, and if our culture is of such a sort which he's assuming, Rabbi Yitzchak Aram is assuming that's true with the family of Avram, then don't worry about the ideology. We'll change their ideology. That's not so difficult. That's all assuming that really ideology is easy, and that's not essential. What's really essential is our character, as I said before. I believe that there's others that might disagree. I've never seen a real argument in regard to this particular passage in the Torah, but I would suggest that Maimonides would argue because he feels that ideology is the guiding force to everything. If you have the proper belief system, which he calls the Yud Gimel Ikarim, the 13 principles of faith, if you have those, that's when you earn your Olam Haba, you earn your world to come. Why? Because those belief systems will then create a person who also has morals and ethics. As if you believe in a one God, if you believe in all of the essential ideas that he lays out in those 13 principles and that Judaism, he says, stands for, then you'll be moved to have the right character. You'll train yourself to follow your ideology. The character follows the ideology, whereas Rabbi Yitzchak Aram is saying, no, that the ideology follows the character. And I think I'll just leave that as an open question. I think that we all have to think about that in what is really guiding us and what guides people in general. I would probably suggest that, as they say in Hebrew, yesh v'yesh. Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's another. We know people that could be convinced of certain ideological truths, and as a result, they may become violent. They might become, and it might just be letting out their bad character traits that they had before. But it could also be an extremely important guiding force. And it could be a fundamental that if you really believe in something, you could take a very nice, passive, kind, gentle person, but if you teach him that you're standing up for religion and you must be violent and kill in order to make sure that our religion stands for truth and holds true, and the other religions of the world have to perish, then it could be that you could convince such a person that he should go against his character and be violent. So it's quite possible that character could follow ideology. On the other hand, we know, and you could look at even within Jewish thought and Jewish halacha, that you know that certain personalities, which you know them to be that kind of personality in their daily life, they tend to have a halachic outlook and an ideological outlook which matches their personality. So I think it could go both ways, but it's something we should all think about in our own lives. What really motivates us? What's really guiding us? Are we rationalizing, is our ideology or our religious ideas or beliefs, or even our political beliefs, guided by our character? We're just rationalizing? Or do we really believe things and that moves us to act in certain ways? We'll leave that as an open question. Have a good Shabbos. Be well.